afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, as you know, we are having discussion on understanding research method and practices. We have started from the theory of research methods, different approaches. We have so far discussed Indological methods. Yesterday we discussed Marxist method. Today we are going to discuss structural and functional methods. And there are also other methods, or you can say approaches. And as in the very first lecture, we told you these are the approaches which help you to understand the entire basic research design and methods. So these lectures are very helpful. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio the same resource person, Dr. Amit Sharma. He teaches sociology at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he has also expertise in research method and research theory. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Amit Sharma for EduSat lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. It is important to understand why I am discussing these approaches: Indological, Marxist, historical, evolutionary, structural, functional, or structural approaches, when the normal pattern in most universities, besides some central universities like Delhi University or JNU, is that whenever the term research method is spoken, people think that the research consists of an objective, a hypothesis, literature review, sources of data, chapterization, etc. But I would like to say bluntly, this is a very stupid way of looking at social research, which has become popular in majority of Indian universities because of colonial legacy. Most universities, unfortunately, do not take social research very seriously. You cannot conduct research unless and until you have a research paradigm. But mostly research paradigms are popular in natural sciences and physical sciences. Research paradigms do exist in social sciences at the advanced level. Otherwise, mostly a good researcher of international repute will begin with sociological theory. Sociological theory will give you the language through which you can conduct research. Then there is method. There are two types of method. One is the method to construct theory, and second is the method to do empirical research which gives us data. Then there is technique. Technique is collection of data from the field. Basically, it consists of two types: survey method and observation method. Now, most universities have introduced a course called Techniques of Social Research, which does not presuppose that the student will be aware with the theoretical issues or the methodological issues. Only in philosophy of science these things are taught. In philosophy of science there are three things which are very important for doing research. One is ontology or theory of reality. Second is epistemology, which is theory of knowledge. Third is methodology, that is the science of method. Within science of method, techniques of social research is taught. Therefore, I have been trying to give a background to doing social research. A researcher does not begin his or her research with an empty mind. He has to operate with a theoretical framework, and that framework guides the type of questions which the researcher asks from the respondents. The researcher does not ask each and every question which may be important from the respondent's point of view. Rather, the researcher asks a question which is pertinent or important according to his theoretical preference or methodological preference. Therefore, I have given my lecture on Indological approach in the beginning. Although Indological approach is a very important approach in India, but unfortunately there are not good books either in Hindi or in English about the Indological approach. There is only one book, Homo hierarchicus, written by the French sociologist Louis Dumont, which discusses Indology and sociology in the introductory chapter, but that is not sufficient to understand varieties of Indologies. In the same way, the Marxist method is popular in history, economics, political science, sociology, and social anthropology. Marxist method is also popular in literature, whether it is Hindi literature or English literature or any other literature. But a good introduction to the Marxist method is not found. In the same way, a structural functional method consists of three different types of varieties. One is the structural functionalism of A.R. Radcliffe Brown, the British social anthropologist. Second is functionalist approach of Bronisław Malinowski. Bronisław Malinowski was also practically a British social anthropologist. Then a structural functionalism is also associated with the name of American sociologists like Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton. Today, I would like to give light on the structural functional approach of doing social research. A structural functional approach is inspired by the writings of Emile Durkheim on the one hand and Herbert Spencer on the other. Now, the method which we had discussed yesterday, that is the Parsonian method, the Marxist method, is usually evolutionary as well as positivist. There is a positivist Marxism and there is a evolutionary Marxism. Both Marxisms are popular. Now, the difference between the Marxist approach and a structural approach, a structural functional approach, is the following. The positivist Marxism or the positivism of Auguste Comte or the positivism of Emile Durkheim considers that the method of physics is very useful for research in social sciences as well. In other words, the research methodology of social sciences should take inspiration, should take guidance from the method of the physicist. This was the view of the positivism. This was the view of Emile Durkheim in Rules of Sociological Method. This was the view of Karl Marx when he wrote Das Kapital. This was the view when Auguste Comte was trying to conceptualize sociological method for the new discipline which he fathered. Now, the structural functionalists of all varieties do not think like the positivist that the method of physics is useful in understanding society. Rather, they think that this is the method of biology and not physics which is useful for understanding society. The question is why? The question is very simple. The physicist is concerned with non-living matters. It is concerned with non-living phenomena. For example, the physicist is concerned with the study of light and heat. It is concerned with the study of the cosmos, the physical cosmos. and it can study the following by following a objective method which is not dependent on the respondent. For example, the light does not say in what way the physicist will study light. The heat will not say in what way the physicist will study heat, but the human beings will say how the sociologist or the historians or the economist is studying them. In other words, the human society is made up of living beings, and the living beings are as good as the researcher. There is not much difference between the researcher and the respondent, because both are living beings and both have their own perceptions, emotions, thinking and having. Therefore, the structural functionalist said that as the biologists study the living beings, in the same way the sociologist and the social scientist should study society, because society is also a social organism like the biological organism. Both are made up of parts and each part contributes to the maintenance of the whole. Therefore, the structural functionalist said that the human body is the metaphor through which the human society should be understood. As the hand and the leg, the eye or the nose is dependent on each other, as the left hand and the right hand are dependent on each other, in the same way different members of society are dependent on each other. Therefore, Radcliffe Brown said we should study a society, a social structure, by understanding the relationship between different parts, different component parts, and we should also focus on the contribution made by each part to the maintenance of the whole. This view of Radcliffe Brown is not shared by the sociologists like Robert Merton. Robert Merton is an American sociologist who follows the method of Talcott Parsons. Talcott Parsons himself was influenced by Emile Durkheim and Max Weber. Max Weber has given a method which is understood as Verstehen method. It is known as Verstehen method. This is a method which claims that the human sciences should have their own method to understand the human society. In sciences, in natural sciences or physical sciences, there is emphasis on explanation. They try to explain social phenomena by maintaining a relationship between the cause and effect. There is a causal relationship between the cause and the effect. There is a cause of everything which exists in the world. Now, this view of positivist like Durkheim is not shared by the structural functionalist or Max Weber. Max Weber says that we cannot explain social phenomena in terms of cause and effect. Rather, we can understand social phenomena by having the subjective meaning of the social actors into account. Now, this view of Max Weber and the Durkheimian concept of a structure and function has been synthesized by A.R. Radcliffe Brown, Bronisław Malinowski, Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton in their own sociological writings of doing social research. Now, what is the difference between the social anthropology of Radcliffe Brown, for example, or Robert Merton? This is very interesting that British sociology does not follow a structural functional method. British social anthropology follows the structural functional method, whereas in America it is the sociologists like Parsons and Merton or Kingsley Davis or Wilbert Moore who follow the structural functional method, whereas the cultural anthropology of America does not follow the structural functional method. This is very interesting and ambiguous and confusing. Why it is like this? But I would like to shed light on this. Now, the British social anthropologists have studied other cultures. They have not studied the English society. They have not studied the European society. They have not studied the American society. In other words, social anthropology is the study of other cultures, usually the non-Western culture, usually the non-industrial culture, usually the non-modern culture. Therefore, they follow the method of a structural functionalism. Therefore, they follow the participant observation method. Therefore, they try to understand the language which the natives speak. For example, Bronislaw Malinowski, who is a functionalist, studied the culture of Trobriand Island. There is no concept of a structure in Bronislaw Malinowski. Bronislaw Malinowski tried to understand the culture of Trobriand Island from the natives' point of view. He spent almost 12 years in the Trobriand Island. He tried to understand the language, the custom, the mores, the laws, the values and norms. Now what the sociologist does? The sociologist like Parsons and Merton and their followers study the modern society. They study their own society, American society. They study the industrial society and they follow the method which is known as survey method. In other words, although the structural functional approach is common to British social anthropology and American sociology, but there is division of labor. The division of labor also follows different methods. In other words, the structural functional approach of Radcliffe Brown studies the non-modern, the non-Western culture by following participant observation, which was developed by Bronislaw Malinowski and which was refined by A.R. Radcliffe Brown and Evans Pritchard. Now, Parsons and Robert Merton, they study American society and the developed society by following the survey method. Now, what is the difference between the survey method and the participant observation? In participant observation, there is no formal questionnaire. There is no formal schedule, interview schedule. There are not pre-constructed questions which is asked from the respondent. Rather, they try to participate in the activity of the people and they try to understand and empathize the people's own perspective about any social phenomena, any cultural phenomena. Take for example the Indian society. The Indian society has been studied by sociologists like M.N. Srinivas and Yogendra Singh. M.N. Srinivas was a student of G.S. Ghuri at Bombay University. Later on, he went to England and studied under A.R. Radcliffe Brown and Evans Pritchard. He has studied the village life in India. He has studied the Rampura village and he has studied basically village, joint family and caste system in the beginning. Then he wrote a book, Social Change in Modern India, in which he discussed the processes like Sanskritization and Westernization. He discussed the processes like secularization and democratization. In other words, he discussed the process of modernization of Indian society. he has studied both the structure of the Indian tradition, and according to Srinivas, the structure of Indian tradition is centered around three institutions: the institution of a village, the institution of joint family, and the institution of caste. Now he said that there is change in modern India in these three institutions. The institution of village is changing, the institution of family is changing, and the institution of caste is also changing. There was a time when people were saying, specifically the Marxists were claiming, that there will be a time when the caste system will give way to the class system. But Amit Sharma claimed that caste is a very resilient social phenomena. Even in modern times, even in developed form, the Indian society will have the caste system. It will have the village society. It will have the village community. It will have the joint family system. The follower of Amit Sharma like A.M. Shah have studied the household dimension of Indian family, and he has differentiated between the household and family. Household is the residential unit, whereas family is a cultural norm. All the Indians by definition live in joint family, but they do not necessarily live in the same household. For practical reasons, the same members of the joint family may live in different households, either in the same village or in different villages, or in towns as well as in villages. In other words, Amit Sharma and A.M. Shah and their disciples tried to study how Indian society has been structured over the years and how the change is taking place. He said that the two processes of Sanskritization and Westernization are sufficient to explain change in Indian society. Now, what is Sanskritization? Sanskritization, according to Amit Sharma, is the process through which the lower caste and tribes in Indian society try to imitate the lifestyles, norms and values of the upper caste, specifically the twice born castes. It is called Sanskritization according to Amit Sharma, and Srinivas claims that Sanskritization has played a cohesive role in Indian society. He said that there has been a complementary process of Westernization which has been taking place since the time of the British rule in India. Now, what is Westernization? In Westernization, the Indian society, particularly the upper castes, try to imitate the ways of the Western elite found in the British Raj or found in the European society. Initially, this process was limited to imitation of the British families living in India. But when India became independent in 1947, Indians tried to imitate not only the ways of the Britishers but also the ways of other Europeans and the Americans. This process of Westernization is not limited only to the upper castes. Rather, there are other castes also which follow the Westernization process. For example, B.R. Ambedkar and his followers among the Dalit community, they articulate the view that instead of Sanskritization, Westernization is a more beneficial method of social change for the Dalits. They think that Sanskritization does not give them sufficient space to develop and prosper, but Westernization gives us liberating potential. But this is a fact that during his own time, B.R. Ambedkar was not very popular among the so-called scheduled castes. For example, there was a Congress leader called Jagjeevan Ram who was more popular in India during the life of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Ambedkar's influence or popularity was limited in the state of Maharashtra in the beginning. But now the teachings of B.R. Ambedkar are also popular in places like Uttar Pradesh and Punjab, Haryana and Madhya Pradesh to a limited extent. But the influence of Jagjeevan Ram, influence of Raidas, the medieval poet saint, or the influence of Narayan Guru, a saint from Kerala, is also important. Baba Saheb Ambedkar is not the only leading light among the Dalits or the scheduled castes. There are other types of influences on them. Baba Saheb Ambedkar himself came from a family which was a Kabir Panthi. The scheduled castes in India are influenced by the local saints, and these examples of Raidas, who was a person from UP, or Kabir, another person from UP, are very influential in North India. Baba Saheb Ambedkar and his new religion, Buddhism, is also spreading among the Dalits or the scheduled castes. But the influence of Narayan Guru or Ravidas or Raidas or Kabir is equally important, if not more important. And the Congress leaders like Meera Kumar try to claim this. Leaders like Ramvilas Paswan also try to claim this. But there is no denying the fact that Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Kasiram and Mayawati, they have become a much more important leaders in recent times. The influence of the Dalit movement defies the process of Sanskritization, and it says that the process of westernization, the process of democratization, the process of secularization which came during the rule of the British in India had become much more important than the process of Sanskritization. But there are other sociologists and social scientists who think that the process of Sanskritization is still going on. For example, the OBC castes have become much more important politically in recent times, and they follow the process of Sanskritization. Therefore, we have a scenario where the upper castes are imitating the Western ways. The OBC are by and large imitating Sanskritization, and the Dalits are divided. The Dalits are following Westernization as well as Sanskritization. There are also some Brahmin castes who are following Sanskritization. Within the same family, you will find that one member follows Westernization and the other member follows Sanskritization. Therefore, Srinivas says that Sanskritization and Westernization, they are not opposite to each other, rather they are complementary to each other, and together they change the Indian society. Some sociologists have said that this change of Sanskritization and Westernization gives only the positional change in Indian society. This changes the self-perception of the people in Indian society, but the structural change does not take place. To some extent, this is the fact that Sanskritization is basically change in the self-perception of the people, which may or may not be shared by the caste higher to the concerned caste or the lower to the concerned caste. In other words, for example, we find some castes like the Gonds, which were earlier tribes. They claim that they are Kshatriyas. There are Jats in Haryana, Western UP and Rajasthan who claim that they are Kshatriyas. Now this claim of the Jats or the Gonds may not be shared by the Rajputs or the Thakurs. It may not be shared by the Yadavas. Yadavas also claim that they are Kshatriyas. Therefore, the claim that we are a superior caste is followed after Sanskritization. Now, Westernization is a different type of social phenomena. By westernization, you do not try to imitate the upper caste, you do not try to Sanskritize, rather you try to democratize, you try to become wealthy. For example, wealth was traditionally important for the Vaisya castes or the Vaisya Varna. Now wealth has become important for all the castes, for all the Varnas. This is the influence of the Western culture, where money has become the most important factor of social prestige and social power. Traditionally, this was not found not only among the Hindus but also among the Muslims and the Christians. For example, among the Muslims, traditionally the Kshatriya castes were more important. Kshatriya caste means castes like Pathans, caste like groups like the Sayyids and Sheikhs. They were more important. They were either priestly castes or Kshatriya castes. But now the merchants or the businessmen have become much more important among the Muslims as well. This is also a process of westernization among the Muslims. The same is true among the Hindus also, among the Christians also. The wealthy people have become much more important. Now, the question of the means has become less important than the question of ends. It is not important how you have gathered money, how you have acquired wealth. The wealth speaks in its own language. The wealthy people are finally accepted as superior, and they are also accepted as respectable people, although their methods and means of acquiring wealth may not be important. For example, it is a fact that corruption is very rampant in Indian society, at least during the modern period. Most modern people have acquired wealth not by hard work, not by honest means, but by following foul means, by following corrupt means. But once they become rich, they try to influence people through their power of wealth. This is a very undesirable trend which is developing in Indian society, but this is one of the aspects of westernization and democratization. Now there is another sociologist, for example, Yogendra Singh or Y. Singh, who follows not Radcliffe Brown but Talcott Parsons. He has written a book, Modernization of Indian Tradition. He said that like patterned variables of Talcott Parsons, there is change from tradition to modern in Indian society, and the process of modernization is taking place in Indian society. This process of modernization is basically political economic in nature. In politics, earlier aristocracy was more important, but now the number of the population, the number of the people, the number of different castes has become much more important, and now democratization has made the numerous castes very important in Indian society. For example, in UP and Bihar until very recently, a combination of Muslims and Yadavas were very influential, and Lalu Prasad Yadav in Bihar and Mulayam Singh Yadav in UP were ruling over their respective states because the Muslims and the Yadavas were claimed to be voting in their favor. I do not know whether this is a fact or it is a fiction or myth, but it is a popular perception in Indian social sciences that the caste and community have played a very important role in the emergence of new political order dominated by the Yadavas like Lalu and Mulayam Singh, or people like Mayawati and Ramvilas Paswan. Now there are other leaders like Mamata Banerjee, who is not following the same path of democratization, who is not following the same process of becoming dominant in West Bengal, which was followed by Lalu or Mulayam in UP or Bihar. Mamata Banerjee had championed the cause of the poor across the caste lines, across the community lines, and both the Hindus and Muslims have voted to Mamata Banerjee in favor of the alliance of the Congress party and Trinamool, and they have voted out to the Marxist alliance, the left alliance, which was ruling over West Bengal since 1977 to 2011. Therefore, the structural functionalists have tried to explain the social change in India from a structural functional perspective. They try to say that the constituent of a social structure plays a very important role in the maintenance or change of the system or the structure. Caste is a very important component of Indian society. Community is another important component of Indian society, and both caste and community have played a very important role in the political process of Indian society. In the same way, in economic spheres also, the caste and community plays a very important role. Now, the caste men become a very important help in acquiring the necessary capital when a business is launched. Sometimes the caste people also become the market for a product launched by the caste men, but the process of democratization and the process of commercialization is also giving way to class. Class is emerging within caste and community. The importance of class cannot be ruled out, although class has been primarily studied by the Marxists in India, but class is also important from Weberian perspective, because the middle class has become very important in Indian society, and the concept of middle class is not very developed in the Marxist perspective. Therefore, the emergence of middle class in India has been explained by following the method of Max Weber, and this method has been combined with structural functionalism as a complementary method to study the changes which are taking place in Indian society. This is in brief the structural functional approach in Indian sociology, which has become influential in other social sciences as well. Now we will discuss in brief the structural approach developed by Claude Lévi-Strauss in France and extended to Indian sociology by Louis Dumont. Claude Lévi-Strauss claimed that the method of biology or the method of physics is not useful for the study of Indian society. The method of physics was used by the positivists. The method of biology was used by the structural functionalist. Lévi-Strauss claims that the method of linguistics, the science of language, is very important for the study of human society, because human relationships are very similar in structure to the linguistic structure. A sentence consists of different words. In the same way, a social relationship consists of different people. Now, Lévi-Strauss claims that as a grammar determines the structure of a language, in the same way, a grammar determines the structure of culture and society in human society. Lévi-Strauss claimed that the method developed by Saussure, Ferdinand Saussure, is very important, and that method may be utilized by the sociologists and social anthropologists to study comparative societies, to study societies in singular and then being compared with each other. Now, the question is, why Lévi-Strauss is talking like this? There are three reasons. One, because he thinks that the human society is neither like the physical objects nor like the human beings or the human organism. Rather, the human relationship or the human society is like the language. As we write different sentences, as per our wish, although we follow the rule of the grammar. In the same way, we establish our own social relationship by following the social norms. There is enough creativity which is available to a social actor in constructing relationship, in maintaining relationship, and Levi-Strauss thought that this method will revolutionize social sciences. The second factor was that Levi-Strauss said both the structural functionalists as well as the positivists both maintained with some sort of evolutionary method where they arrange traditional society at the lower bottom and they arrange the modern society at the higher stratum. They try to claim that the traditional is inferior and the modern is superior. They try to claim that the rural is inferior and the urban is superior. They try to claim that agricultural is inferior and industrial is superior. Levi-Strauss does not believe in this type of superiority or inferiority. He said that all human societies are like one. They have differences, but these differences are not qualitative. Each society is constituted or constructed according to its own inner logic, and it may be different to the other society, but it is not necessarily inferior. He said that all human society is human, and as human they are all equal. He said that before him there was a problem. What was the problem? Before Levi-Strauss, most sociologists, most social scientists were operating with only two types of reliable data. They had reliable data about Europe and they had reliable data about Africa, because the social anthropologist and the cultural anthropologist had done participant observation in African society, in the simple society of Africa and Australia, but the data from Asia was not reliable. It was rather based on the Indological and Orientalist studies, which suffered from different types of methodological and technical lacunas, which we have discussed in our first lecture. Levi-Strauss was influenced by the nephew of Emile Durkheim, Marcel Mauss. Marcel Mauss was one of the few social scientists in Europe who gathered data from Asia. He and Henry Hubert wrote a book called Sacrifice, which gathered data from places like India. Then he wrote another book, The Gift, which gathered data from Asia. Therefore, Levi-Strauss was having a more reliable data, Maussian data from Asia, and he also had reliable data from Latin America. Therefore, he had a wider range of data available to him, which gave him an opportunity to compare and contrast societies in Africa with Asia, Asia with Latin America, Asia with Europe, Asia with America, both Latin America and North America. Therefore, he was in a better position, he was in an advantageous position to compare and contrast, and he claimed that what is claimed as mythology in non-Western society is actually history written in another idiom. He said what is called history of European society or modern society is basically modern myths. In other words, he claimed history writing is like myth writing, and both have their own grammar, both have their own idiom, and both are constructed by the historians or the mythologists, and it does not necessarily correspond with reality out there in the field. In other words, all the historians and all the mythologists suffer from the Kantian dilemma that we cannot understand reality as it is. In other words, we cannot study noumena or reality as it is. We can only understand reality as it appears through our own perspective, our own theory, our own ideology, our own research preferences. Therefore, what is called history, according to Levi-Strauss, is another type of myth, and what is called myth is actually another type of history. Therefore, he compared history with myth and claimed that evolutionary method is very unreliable. We cannot say that traditional is inferior. We cannot claim that Afghanistan is inferior and America is superior. We cannot claim that Vietnam is inferior and America is superior. And we have seen recently how Afghanis, how Iraqis, how Vietnamese have defeated America, the most developed country of the modern world, the most industrial country of the world, the most militarily superior country of the world. In other words, we can claim that America is superior in Hollywood films, America is superior in R&D, America is superior in military might, but American culture is not necessarily a better culture. The Iranian culture has its own merit, the Afghani culture has its own merit, the Indian culture has its own merit, and it is not inferior to the American culture or the European culture. Therefore, we find that the French structuralism of Claude Lévi-Strauss is the most neutral research method available to social scientists anywhere in the world. It is the most impartial method developed by any Western social scientist. There are limitations of structuralism also, which was pointed out by post-structuralists like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, but that we will take up some other time. It is called post-structuralist method or postmodern method. Then there are also ethnomethodologists like Garfinkel or phenomenologists like Alfred Schutz or culture analysts like Clifford Geertz, who have a different view from Lévi-Strauss. But there is no denying the fact that Lévi-Strauss revolutionized social sciences by claiming that the savage mind is equal to the American mind, that the myth is history, that the data which the Europeans have about Asia is faulty, it is biased, it is prejudiced. He had a claim which should be verified from the field, and it has been verified by Louis Dumont from Indian society. What is his claim? His claim is that any society consists of constituent structural units which may be different from each other but which are homologous. Homology is a concept developed by Lévi-Strauss which says that two structures may not be uniform but they may be equal. Before Lévi-Strauss, equality was equated with uniformity. In other words, in case there is equality between man and woman, both should wear the same type of clothes, both should smoke, both should drink. This is not necessary according to Lévi-Strauss. For example, the traditional Muslims of Afghanistan have different types of code for the women and the men, but it cannot be said that Islam of Afghanistan exploits women. They have a different type of notion about man-woman relationship which should be respected because every culture is based on certain foundational notions. In the same way, in Indian society, there are concepts like pativrata, which has been said that it is not against men, but it is against women. But Indian society also treats man and woman relationship in a different way. What Levi-Strauss is trying to say is that no uniformal code is applicable to the whole society. It is not possible to dictate every society to follow the American norms and values. American norms and values are as ethnocentric as any other culture. In other words, every culture suffers from its own biases, its own prejudices, its own conceptions about man and woman, nature and culture, God and human beings. And any society can be understood only when we can compare and contrast the whole. Levi-Strauss says that the parts cannot be compared, only the whole can be compared. The parts should be understood in context of the whole, because the parts have no meaning independent of the whole. Therefore, first a social unit should be understood in the context of the whole, and then one whole should be compared with another whole. Both wholes, both structures may appear different from each other in the beginning, but at last, from a structural perspective, both are equal. Both may not be uniform, but both are equal. It is called homologous according to Levi-Strauss. I will stop here and invite questions.
We have questions, but by the time we get connect to our viewers, I would like to say that you have well illustrated how facts can be distinguished from the perception and also myths. Like giving the example of Sanskritization, you said that which race is superior to others, which caste is superior to others. The students can easily find it out. The same way you said that this Muslim and Yadav voted for the particular party or not, it could be a certain, it could not be taken as a truth by the researcher. One must distinguish first and go for the research whether this is truth or not.
Yeah.
So, well illustrated how students can distinguish between the facts and the perception and myths. So, well, I invite a question from the students and welcome friends. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, my question is, you quoted at last the term that American society is currently ethnocentric. During the lecture, you also quoted it is the most renowned and refined culture. How can you defend this term?
Can you repeat your question? Can you repeat your question, please?
Sir, during the lecture, you quoted the term that American society is ethnocentric.
Okay.
But during your lectures, you quoted America, or we can say the West is most refined. So far as our cultural component or sociological thought is concerned, how you can, or you are going to defend these two terms in an amalgamation in a single lecture? So please.
One is what his question is, he's asking, you quoted that American culture is ethnocentric, and the other part is we are not understanding what is some contrary statement. You said that one side of the ethnocentric and the other most revered or the most refined countries. How it could be there?
I think the confusion arises because we are comparing two methods. According to a structural functionalism or according to Marxism, the American society is a developed society. According to a structural functionalism or according to Marxism, American society is a developed society. According to Marx, capitalism is developed, it is desirable in contrast to feudalism, in contrast to ancient society. Capitalism is inferior to socialism, but the socialist society was not available to Karl Marx. Karl Marx died in 1883. Now this view of a structural functionalist and Marxist is disputed not by me but by Claude Lévi-Strauss, who is a champion of structuralism. He is claiming, or ethnosociologists like Makim Marriott are claiming, that every society or every culture is equal. Every society or every culture is equal. One society cannot be compared with another society in evolutionary framework, where you give a lower status to traditional society. Every society suffers from ethnocentrism. This is the view Lévi-Strauss is trying to claim. This is not my claim.
Okay. So due to different method, apply a study different way.
In case you follow different methods, you will come to different conclusions. Lévi-Strauss is only claiming that compare and contrast those two society without thinking which is superior or which is inferior.
Yeah, like when we study the society of India from the, okay, let us take question first. Please ask your question, friends.
Sir, my another question is, we have discussed the various techniques here. We can say research techniques or approaches, structural functional method, or we can say positivistic method. And also doing these techniques, the conduct or execution of these techniques, we are using, you quoted here, the ontological thought, epistemological thought, and methods. Is it possible to use these three techniques, ontological, epistemological, and the methods, in these entire approaches? And what is the basic crux or technique in the epistemological approach or technique?
Okay, as you talked about the various techniques like ontology, epistemology, and the other is the methodology. So what is the crux of it, and when one can apply which techniques? A combination of technique could be applied.
The
How a researcher can identify this?
Observation is a qualitative method. It does not rely much on quantitative techniques. In contrast, the survey method is dependent on quantitative techniques like statistics, mean, median, mode, etc. But this type of research is possible only when the literacy rate is very high. In a society which is not much literate, the qualitative methods are much more reliable. In a society which is literate, you can apply quantitative methods as well, but there is a problem in quantitative method. For example, in case 51% people opine in a particular way, you will have to give weightage to that answer. But in democracy, the minority opinion is equally important. For example, in India, India is a Hindu-dominated country. About 80% population is Hindu. In case we follow the survey method, the Hindu opinion will become much more important than the Muslim opinion or the Christian opinion or the Buddhist opinion or the Jain opinion or the Sikh opinion. But it does not mean that the Hindu opinion will portray India in a very authentic way. The view of the minorities are equally important, and in social research, the minority view is neglected.
So it depends upon the question, what you want to study.
It depends upon the question, but the question, it is difficult to ask a good question. Most people are bothered about the answers, but asking a good research question is much more difficult than giving the answer.
We have another question, I think.
When you are asking a good question, you should be aware of the moral responsibility which you suffer from, because an intellectual is not only a person, he is a representative of the academicians. And as an academician, you should be above your personal preferences. Therefore, I am not concerned with my personal views. when I am speaking on the research method, I may be having any view that is secondary or unimportant. More important is the fact how a good research should be conducted, how a good question should be framed, how that question may be verified from the people in
we have another question.
Impartial way.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Sir, since by the process of Sanskritization, the lower castes imitate the lifestyle of higher castes. So this is possible for the lower caste only once they get economically well off. Does it correspond to Marxist view that the caste system will evade away from Indian society and make way for economic class, I mean class system?
His question is, Sanskritization gave way to the imitating the lower caste to the upper caste, and in the process they also acquired money, or we can say the wealth. So how could be, what I do understand by the, how you could explain this by the Marxist approach?
The Marxist approach is very different. The Marxist approach thinks that class relationship is more important than caste relationship. The Marxists think that the ownership of means of production is more important than the perception of the caste. Therefore, these approaches cannot be compared. Marxists give more importance to economy, political economy, whereas structural functionalists give more importance to cultural factors. They give more importance to the normative factors, norms and values.
Yeah. Do we have another question? Okay. So another question: what led to the worst? It's caste led to the class, or the class led to the caste?
The Marxists believed that when India will move on the path of industrialization and capitalism, caste will give way to class, but it has not taken place. In India, caste and class both exist together simultaneously. There is caste when marriage is arranged. Caste becomes important when marriage is arranged. Class becomes important when consumption is taken into account.
So, well friends, we talked about the different approaches. There are many others, like Dr. Amit Sharma said, that post-structuralism, phenomenology and ethnology and cultural analysis. So we will not be able to cover those, but we will try to do a lecture on these topics later on. Tomorrow we are going to discuss a research method from practical point of view, how to make a proposal, how to frame the question, hypothesis and literature review. Dr. Pradeep Nair from Jamia Millia University will be here for the discussion. So I hope today's lecture must have benefited you, and it will give you a framework for your research practices and research methods. So thank you very much, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Amit Sharma for giving such an insightful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.